You know what's crazy? Right now, as you're watching this, there's something you want to do. Maybe it's starting that business. Maybe it's having that difficult conversation. Maybe it's making a complete change in your life. But you're not doing it, and you know exactly why. Fear, that invisible wall that keeps you stuck in the same place, day after day, year after year. But here's what nobody tells you. Fear isn't your enemy. It's actually your compass pointing directly at what matters most. And in the next few minutes, I'm going to show you how to turn that fear into the fuel that drives every action you take. So if you're tired of letting fear make your decisions for you, hit that like button right now. Subscribe to Rise Without Noise. And let's dive into something that's going to completely change how you see fear forever. Let me tell you about Sarah. She spent 7 years in a job she hated. Every single morning, her alarm would go off and she'd feel that knot in her stomach. She knew she was capable of more. She had ideas, dreams, plans. But every time she thought about quitting, about starting her own thing, fear would show up. What if I fail? What if I can't pay my bills? What if people think I'm stupid for leaving a stable job? So she stayed. 7 years. Until one day, her company downsized and she got let go anyway. All that fear, all that playing it safe, and she ended up in the exact situation she was afraid of. But here's the twist. Losing that job was the best thing that ever happened to her, because it forced her to confront what she'd been running from. Within 6 months, she launched her own consulting business. Within a year, she was making more than she ever did at that corporate job. And you know what she told me? The fear never went away. She just learned to move with it instead of being frozen by it. That's the first truth about fear you need to understand. It never completely disappears. We have this fantasy that successful people, brave people, fearless people don't feel fear. That's garbage. Everyone feels fear. The difference is what they do with it. Most people treat fear like a stop sign. They feel it and they freeze. They take it as evidence that they shouldn't move forward. But what if fear is actually the opposite? What if fear is your internal system telling you that something matters? Think about it. You're not afraid of things you don't care about. You don't fear failure at things that mean nothing to you. Fear shows up precisely because something is important, because there's something at stake, because you actually give a damn. So when you feel that fear in your chest, that's not a warning to stop. That's confirmation that you're on to something real. Now, let me break down what actually happens in your brain when fear takes over. Your amygdala, this almond-shaped part of your brain, is constantly scanning for threats. It's been doing this since your ancestors were running from predators. The problem is, your amygdala can't tell the difference between a lion chasing you and the fear of public speaking. It triggers the same response. Fight, flight, or freeze. Your heart races. Your palms sweat. Your thinking gets cloudy. And in that state, your brain is trying to protect you by keeping you exactly where you are. Because what's familiar feels safe, even if it's slowly killing you. This is why you can know logically what you should do, but still not do it. Your logical brain gets overridden by your survival brain. And your survival brain will choose a miserable certainty over an uncertain possibility every single time. But here's where it gets interesting. There's another part of your brain called the prefrontal cortex. This is your executive function, your decision maker, your long-term planner. When you learn to activate this part of your brain, you can literally override the fear response. Not eliminate it, but choose your action despite it. And the way you activate it is actually simple. You name the fear. You get specific about it. Because fear loves to stay vague and unnamed in the shadows. When you drag it into the light and say exactly what you're afraid of, it loses its power. So instead of just feeling this general anxiety, you write down, I'm afraid that if I start this business, I'll run out of money in 3 months and have to move back in with my parents and everyone will know I failed. Suddenly, that's not just fear anymore. That's a specific scenario you can actually plan for. You can ask, is that likely? What would I need to do to prevent that? What's my backup plan if it happens? Fear that's named becomes a problem you can solve. Fear that stays unnamed becomes a prison you live in. Let me share something personal. A few years ago, I had an opportunity to speak at a major conference. This was the kind of stage that could change everything for my career. And I was terrified, not just nervous. Full on. Can't sleep. Feel sick to my stomach terrified. I kept imagining myself freezing up on stage, forgetting everything. People walking out, the video going viral for all the wrong reasons. My first instinct was to make up an excuse and decline. And I actually drafted that email. But before I sent it, I did something different. I made a list. On one side, I wrote down every fear I had about saying yes. On the other side, I wrote down every fear I had about saying no, and that second list hit me hard. I was afraid I'd regret it forever. I was afraid I'd always wonder what could have been. I was afraid I'd lose respect for myself. I was afraid I'd be 60 years old telling stories about the chances I didn't take. When I looked at both lists, I realized something crucial. I was going to feel fear either way. The question wasn't how to avoid fear. The question was which fear I could live with. The fear of trying and possibly failing, or the fear of not trying and definitely wondering. I gave that speech. And yeah, I was nervous the whole time. But I did it, and it opened doors I never imagined. Not because I conquered fear, but because I chose which side of fear to stand on. This brings me to the action part of the mindset shift. Because understanding fear is one thing, moving despite it is another, and this is where most motivational content fails you. They tell you to just do it, just take action, just push through, but they don't tell you how. So, let me give you the actual framework. It's called the 5-second decision rule, and it works with your brain instead of against it. Here's how it goes. The moment you have an instinct to act on a goal, you have 5 seconds to physically move toward it before your brain kills the idea. 5 seconds. That's it. Because what happens is this. You have an impulse. Maybe it's to send that email, make that call, start that project. And in that moment, there's a tiny window where your prefrontal cortex is in charge. But if you hesitate, if you give yourself time to think about it, your amygdala takes over and floods you with every reason why you shouldn't. So you count backwards. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And you move. You don't think. You don't debate. You physically stand up, open your laptop, pick up your phone, whatever the next physical action is. This isn't about being reckless. It's about not giving fear the driver's seat. And here's the thing that most people miss about action. It doesn't have to be big. In fact, it shouldn't be big at first. Because when you're paralyzed by fear, the worst thing you can do is set some massive goal that feels impossible. That just reinforces the fear. Instead, you break it down to the smallest possible action. If you want to start a business but you're terrified, you don't need to quit your job tomorrow. You just need to spend 15 minutes researching your idea today. That's it. If you want to get in shape but the gym intimidates you, you don't need to commit to working out every day. You just need to put on your workout clothes right now. The action itself isn't even the point. The point is teaching your brain that fear doesn't control you, that you can feel fear and still move. Every tiny action is evidence. Evidence that you're stronger than your fear. Evidence that you can trust yourself. And when you stack up enough of that evidence, your entire identity starts to shift. Now let's talk about what happens when you do take action and things don't go the way you planned. Because they won't. Not always. Sometimes you're going to fail. Sometimes it's going to be uncomfortable. Sometimes people are going to judge you. And this is the moment when most people quit. They take it as confirmation that their fear was right. See, I knew I shouldn't have tried. But this is the critical distinction. Failure isn't proof that you were wrong to try. Failure is data. It's information. It's feedback. Every successful person you admire has a graveyard of failures behind them. The difference is they didn't interpret those failures as stop signs. They interpreted them as course corrections. Thomas Edison didn't fail 10,000 times at making the light bulb. He found 10,000 ways that didn't work, and each one brought him closer to the one that did. When you shift from a fear-based mindset to an action-based mindset, you stop seeing outcomes as final verdicts and start seeing them as experiments. Did this work? No? Okay, what did I learn? What will I try differently next time? This isn't just positive thinking. This is literally how your brain rewires itself. Every time you try something, fail, learn, and try again. You're building new neural pathways. You're training your brain that failure isn't fatal. That discomfort isn't dangerous. That fear is just a feeling, not a fact. Let me give you a real example of this in action. There's a guy named James who wanted to be a writer, but he had massive fear around putting his work out there. What if it's terrible? What if nobody reads it? What if people tear it apart? So his writing sat in notebooks and computer files for years. Then he made a decision. He was going to publish one piece every week for a year. No matter what. No matter how scared he was. No matter how few people read it. No matter what the response was. The first piece he published got 7 views. All from people he personally sent the link to. It felt humiliating. But he published again the next week. And the next. And the next. Some pieces got ignored. Some got negative comments. But some resonated. People started sharing them. Other writers started reaching out. By the end of the year, he had a small but engaged audience. And more importantly, he wasn't afraid anymore. Not because the fear went away, but because he'd proven to himself over and over that he could feel the fear and publish anyway. That's the power of consistent action. It doesn't just get you results. It changes who you are. So if you're still watching this, I want you to drop a comment right now. Tell me one thing you've been afraid to do. Just name it. Get it out of your head and into words, because that's the first step. And if this video is helping you see fear differently, share it with someone who needs to hear this, because chances are someone in your life is stuck in the same place you've been. Here's what I want you to understand about the relationship between fear and action. They're not opposites. They're partners. Fear points you toward what matters. Action proves you're capable of handling it. And the more you practice moving with fear instead of waiting for it to go away, the more natural it becomes. You start to recognize that tightness in your chest not as a warning, but as a signal. Oh, this matters. This is important. This is where I need to pay attention and move forward. And over time, your tolerance for discomfort expands. Things that would have paralyzed you before become just part of the process. You develop what psychologists call self-efficacy, the belief that you can handle whatever comes your way. Not because nothing bad will happen, but because you trust yourself to figure out when it does. And let's address something real. There are people watching this right now who are thinking, this sounds great, but you don't understand my situation. My fear is rational. I have real responsibilities. I can't just take risks. And you're right. Some fears are absolutely rational. If you have kids to feed and bills to pay, you can't just burn everything down on a whim. But here's what I'm not saying. I'm not saying ignore reality. I'm not saying be reckless. I'm saying that even within your constraints, there's movement available to you. There's always a next smallest step. Maybe you can't quit your job today, but you can spend 30 minutes this week working on your side project. Maybe you can't move across the country, but you can have the conversation you've been avoiding. Maybe you can't overhaul your entire life, but you can make one decision today that's aligned with who you want to become. The action-based mindset isn't about dramatic leaps. It's about consistent direction. It's about asking yourself every single day, what's one thing I can do right now that moves me forward? Even if it's tiny, even if it's imperfect, even if I'm scared? Because here's the truth that nobody wants to hear. The cost of inaction is always higher than the cost of action. Always. When you don't act, you don't just stay in the same place. You actually move backwards. Because the world keeps moving. Opportunities pass. Time runs out. And worst of all, you start to lose trust in yourself. Every time you know what you should do and you don't do it, you're sending yourself a message. I can't trust myself to follow through. I'm the kind of person who stays stuck. I'm not capable. And that message compounds. It becomes your identity. But every time you feel fear and act anyway, even in the smallest way, you send the opposite message. I keep my promises to myself. I'm the kind of person who moves forward. I can handle hard things. And that message compounds too. It becomes unshakable confidence. Not confidence that you'll never fail. Confidence that you'll be okay even when you do. So, let me leave you with a challenge. Not someday. Right now. I want you to identify one thing you've been putting off because of fear. One conversation. One decision. One step. And I want you to commit to taking the smallest possible action on it within the next 24 hours. Not the whole thing. Not the perfect version. Just the next step. And then I want you to come back to this video and leave a comment telling me you did it. Because that's how you build momentum. That's how you prove to yourself that fear doesn't run your life. You do. And when enough people at Rise Without Noise start doing this, when we create a community of people who choose action over fear, that's when everything changes. Not just for you individually, but collectively. We become the example. We become the proof that a different way is possible. Fear to action isn't a one-time switch you flip. It's a practice. It's a daily choice. Some days will be easier than others. Some days the fear will feel overwhelming, and you'll want to crawl back into what's familiar. And that's okay. This isn't about perfection. It's about direction. It's about choosing, over and over again, to move toward the life you actually want instead of away from the discomfort you're trying to avoid. Because the discomfort is coming either way. You can have the discomfort of growth or the discomfort of regret. You can have the fear of trying or the fear of wondering what if. But you don't get to avoid discomfort altogether. So choose the one that builds something. Choose the one that makes you stronger. Choose the one that, when you're looking back on your life, makes you proud of who you became. Thank you for watching this all the way through. If this resonated with you, make sure you're subscribed to Rise Without Noise because we're just getting started. Hit that notification bell so you don't miss what's coming next. Drop a comment below with your one action you're committing to, and share this video with someone who needs to hear it, because the world needs more people who move despite their fear, more people who choose action over paralysis, more people like you. I'll see you in the next one.